Salutations, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland, and here I am in front of Holland House in London. This area is called Holland Park, and it's Holland House lends its name to Holland Park. So, Sir Francis Cope built Cope Castle here at the start of the 17th century. Cope, who was Lord Chancellor, which was to say head of the legal system, and indeed the King's most important minister, so both a government minister and a judge in those days, because the Chancellery was the King's writing department. The Lord Chancellor goes back to, my goodness, I think the 10th century AD, long before there's a Prime Minister. So Kings obviously received many letters, more than they could possibly cope with. So the Chancellor had to read these, write back, respond to them, if it wasn't vital enough for the King to be informed. But eventually the Chancellery was a department. It was dozens of clerks. But it was then not just correspondence, it was court records, what the ruling was in a court case, some found guilty, found innocent, if they're guilty, what the sentence was, civil cases, who won, if someone was being sued, or about contract, who owned which property, title deeds and so forth, who paid their tax, who hadn't, and all the rest of it. So that was the Lord Chancellor, but the Lord Chancellor was invariably a clergyman, a priest, and the King would confess to him, so he's keeper of the King's conscience. Anyway, there have been many famous Lord Chancellors like Sir Thomas More, Cardinal Wolsey, but I shan't go through all of them, Thomas Becket. But anyway, in modern times he's become a judge, not a government minister as such. So Francis Cope, he was there working for King James I of England. That king was also known as James VI, the King of Scots. And this was well outside London. Anyway, then in the 18th century, Cope Castle was inherited by Lady Rich, and Lady Rich married the Earl of Holland. The Earl of Holland was a Tory politician. Now, when I say Holland, it doesn't mean Holland, the country. There's an area of England called Holland in Lincolnshire. There's Holland. I wonder if it's etymologically related to Holland, as in it's something to do with very low-lying land, because eastern England often is very flat, and it's not even that far from the Netherlands. Anyway, so the Earl of Holland, he demolished Cope Castle, which had been built in 1605, and it was 1768 when the first Lord Holland acquired this space, and he started to build Holland House. Now, his younger son, Charles James Fox, rose to great fame as a politician and indeed as Foreign Secretary. And so this became a well-known hangout of the Whig Party, because Charles James Fox, he bucked family tradition, he split with the Tory Party, he became a Whig. His father had been Paymaster General of the Forces, as in all the salaries for the Army and the Royal Navy passed through Lord Holland's personal bank account, and he was allowed to keep the interest. So it was obviously completely unethical. This public duty led to private emolument, a bit like Trump does today with his hotels, drawing no distinction between the national interest and his personal financial gain. Anyway, so Charles James Fox's family, as I said, had been Tories, and even their names, like Charles I, who was, well, leader of the Royalist side, obviously in the English Civil War, and King James II, and the Tories were formed to support his succession. That's why he's named Charles James Fox. So he became a Whig and was one of the more advanced Whigs in his opinions, but he really was worried by the opinions of certain Whigs who he thought went too far in advocating the vote for all men. So Charles James Fox, he wanted the abolition of slavery, he was well ahead of his time. He was an early advocate of American independence, wearing the uniform of the Continental Army, as in that's really the embryo United States Army, during the American Revolution to indicate his support for that cause. Now obviously some Tories absolutely detested him, and Tory mobs would try and vandalize his property, and indeed they once burnt alive a fox, as in to indicate what they'd like to do to Charles James Fox himself. Notice he's either known as Fox or else Charles James Fox, never Charles Fox. So as Charles James Fox said, his interests were women, gambling and politics in that order. And when he was 16, he'd been sent to Paris, and his father had arranged a session for him with Paris's most renowned courtesan. Anyway, he went to Hart Hall, Oxford, as now called Hertford College, and then it was kind of an odd choice for him, not such an illustrious college, and then elected to Parliament for Midhurst when he was only 21. So really cut his teeth for his radical philippics and calling for the influence of the crown to be reduced. He absolutely detested King George III, whom he publicly alluded to as Satan, and took a toast to our sovereign lord the people, which some people thought made him a seditionist. Anyway, so Lord North was his bugbear, this Tory Prime Minister. Lord North, Blubbery North, as he was unkindly known. His title was actually the Earl of Guildford. That was his highest title, but always known by the junior title, Lord North. He was Prime Minister at the time of the American Revolution. And it got to the stage when Lord North couldn't command the support of Parliament, and so he's going to have to seek some more support from factions opposing his policy. Lord North, a tragic figure who kept being asked to be relieved of his duties, but it never ever happened. So George III regarded the Prime Minister as a servant like any other who couldn't simply resign, had to be let go. It was up to the King whether Lord North could step down as Prime Minister or not. So finally, there's a very audacious démarche. Lord North and Charles James Fox chose to join forces. Nobody could believe it. What a jaw-dropping development, an axis between two arch enemies, the Fox-North coalition, and that's when Charles James Fox briefly got to be Foreign Secretary. But it didn't last kissing time. It fell after a few months, and then they brought in Pitt the Younger, William Pitt the Younger, as in son of Prime Minister William Pitt the Elder. So people thought that Pitt the Younger's government would not be able to survive. They called it the Mince Pies Administration. It was ushered in December 1783, assuming it would fall before they ate mince pies, as in a Christmas dinner. Well, after pudding you'd eat mince pies. But it lasted for 18 years. So Charles James Fox was out of office most of that time. He did come back into office briefly in 1806 as Foreign Secretary, but he died. The only Foreign Secretary, so far as I know, to die en poste. He died at Chiswick House, which is about 5 miles west of here. But he spent a lot of time here, his parents' place, and Fox, he ran up enormous gambling debts, and he said he preferred not to bet on horses or something like that, because that involved an element of skill, was a little bit predictable if you studied the form. He liked games which were solely matters of chance, the throw of the dice or the spin of a wheel, and got himself hugely into debt. But it didn't matter, because his brother was married for years and years, and had no children, so assumed his elder brother, who was several years older, would die. Charles James Fox would inherit all the money and be able to clear the debt. But then, from the creditor's point of view, catastrophe struck. Charles James Fox's elder brother had a child. Yes, his wife was delivered of a healthy baby. Even worse, it was a boy. So there's no doubt about the right to inherit the property. That was that. I'm not sure what happened to those creditors. Anyway, so this is Holland House, which gives its name to the area of Holland Park. I'll show you. But it was struck by a bomb in 1940. And all through the 1930s, it had been the site of many a political soiree. And so 3/4 of it was destroyed. This little bit you see here functions as a youth hostel, truly the most stylish youth hostel in the world. I was showing you a little bit of the gate, right? So the whole area of London is known as Holland Park, not just the actual park of Holland Park. That is that. So obviously it was much bigger, and you can see photos of it, and it was really just the same going across this way, the same style, the same sort of neo-Jacobean style, built in the late 18th century. And they're playing fields beyond. It used to be the Commonwealth Institution, built in the early 60s, since demolished. I can't remember what's replaced it. It was back in the early 60s when people really thought the Commonwealth was a thing and was going to matter, before the United Kingdom joined the European Economic Community. So the whole area around here is Holland Park. There's Holland Park Tube Station, and Holland Park gives its name to several streets, like just Holland Park Road or whatever. All right, that's enough from Holland House.